everyone. Welcome to Light Haven, the podcast for all things spiritual, mystical, and energetic. My name is Ruth, mystery student towards the awakening of consciousness.
And my name is Bianca, lightworker and astrology enthusiast.
Today, we're going to be discussing a topic that most of us cannot get away from at some point in our lives. That is breakups. Mm-hmm. We thought it would be timely because we've discussed relationships.
Yeah, we've done quite a bit on relationships, so It's kind of interesting to now delve into the what happens when it ends.
Exactly.
Kind of yeah.
And I think that people can take it very personally, whether the relationship works out or not, and think that if it doesn't work, then they are a failure or they have no hope. And that can be part of why people get really upset. But why do you think breakups are hard for people?
So I've been thinking about this, and it's a lot of things. Breakups are hard because there's a lot of pain that we can feel attached to that. It's a lot of things that we've tied to this connection that now that it's ending, we don't want to let go, or we're not ready to let go. Just how as a human we long for connection. We're social beings, and so to have that connection end can be hard. And then also sometimes that can jeopardize the feeling of security that we once felt. Now I don't have someone to share my life with. Now I don't have that extra income. Now I don't have, you don't have, your security is compromised. There's a feeling of self-worth that we can tie ourselves to our partner and be like, and derive a sense of self-esteem from the relationship, as opposed to how we feel about ourselves intrinsically. So having a lot of these things come to an end can be very jarring and very your world's turned upside down and you don't know how to process it all. So for me, that's partly why breakups are hard. And you were tied to this, you had this vision and this hope of, or this dream of being together and how your life looked in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years with this person, and now it's cut short.
It's that sense of what could have been.
Totally.
And then feeling the feeling of loss because you had all these hopes. And if you really want to ask a Zen Buddhist, it's the attachment to those hopes and clinging to that has to be my future. That's the way it's going to go. And when we say someone's world is turned upside down or shattered, it's because it didn't go the way they'd envisioned it in their mind. So again, the gap between what we expect, what we desire, what we hope for, and what is the reality. And that can make someone very sad. If I think back to when I was in my 20s, so the first breakups would be really hard. Probably not when I was a teenager, because you're more just young and making discoveries, and I don't think you're as emotionally invested. You're not necessarily imagining a house and children. You're just figuring things out. Who are you? Who are the people around you? So you don't place that much importance on relationships. You understand that you're probably not going to marry the person that you're seeing as a teenager. But then when you come into your 20s, that's when your view can be very hopeful and looking forward. I have my whole life ahead of me. What is it going to be like? Who am I going to spend it with? And we have all these things that we imagine that we really get attached to. And maybe I'll be living in this house with this person, and we'll have this many children and this many pets, and these will be the friends around us. And you can go on and on, all the details, imagining that in your head. So then with all that in mind, as someone in your 20s, you start dating, and I don't know if other people had this, but you can sort of think, maybe it's this one. And then, oh no, it wasn't that one. Maybe it's this one. And instead of just seeing the relationship for what it is, there's this pressure as a young person that this could be the one, or no, this could be the one. And when it turns out that it didn't go that way, then that can be really challenging, because you feel like, who am I going to build my life with? Not realizing that you can build your life on your own, and you don't have to necessarily rely on someone else to build this picture in your head, because that's demanding control over another person who has their own individual autonomy.
Yeah, totally.
So it's like setting yourself up for disaster. And also, I think when you have that expectation, it's the pressure of wanting to create that can be what causes the relationship to not work out. Because no one can take that pressure, not you, not the other person. It's when you're free to be in the moment, be yourself, and accept it for how it is, that you can really explore and become a team without feeling this stress like there's no space.
Yeah. I like what you said there. There were a few things that it made me think about in just hearing you talk a little bit about, how things could be through the decades, teenage years, 20s, 30s. I think for me personally, I was thinking to myself, like, even as a teenager, for me, it was, if I was going through a breakup, oh my gosh, it was so hard. And even in my 20s, it was so hard. And there's a couple of things as to why I had trouble with that, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to go through some of those things. So first of all, I grew up in a very religious household. We're very strict with our religion, and a lot of it was centered on growing up, finding your forever person, starting a family together, and being together forever, for all eternity. And so that was instilled in us even when we were young, early teenage years. When we first started dating, it was like, find you someone in the same religion, because they're going to have the same values and beliefs as you. But also it wasn't just dating for fun, it was dating to marry.
Right. So you didn't have that same step that I had of, oh, you're a teenager, don't worry about it, that will be later.
Yeah. So this was instilled in us, in trying to find that perfect partner, your partner for life, even at a young age. But they also discouraged us to date before 16. So it was like, you start dating after that, after you turn 16. And even then, maybe not even then, even after you're 20. But also, I think it's different cultures in different countries. So the religion is all over, is in most continents. And I do hear that it's a different culture in other parts of the world, where they encourage group dating when you're, in your...
Like hanging out.
Yeah, just hanging out, as opposed to the one-on-one, because there's a lot that it's believed that you're a lot safer in a group as opposed to being one-on-one, and you're going to not get yourself caught into temptation.
Yeah, right. But also you will be able to, I think, I'm not advocating group dating, but in that setting, you'll be able to see another side of them, because you can see how they are to people when they're not talking to you. And it takes the heat off of, oh, what am I going to say next in this moment and in this minute, and do I have to be perfect? And you can just actually get to know each other without that pressure of sitting across the table, face to face, eyeball to eyeball.
Totally. And then in my 20s, it was like, well, you're going to get married. That's just how it's going to be. You're looking for a life partner by the time you're in your early 20s. And I'm just like, I'm looking back now, I'm in my 30s, and I thought I was such a baby. How could I think that I was ready to be looking for a life partner at that age. So there's a lot of cultural, religious pressures to put emphasis on finding the one. But then on top of that, personally, so I'm going to tie this in astrologically. So for those of you who may not know much about astrology, we have our sun sign, and our sun sign is the zodiac sign that the sun was in when at the time of your birth. So if you were born on the 3rd of August, you know you're a Leo. You have a sun in Leo. And so most of us are kind of aware of that aspect of astrology. Now, our sun sign is tied up in the plot line of our life. So whatever house it's going to fall in your birth chart, it's going to give you the constant reoccurring themes that you will find yourself grappling with in order to grow. If you think of a movie, you think of, this is the plot line. That is what the sun can tell you in your birth chart. So for me, my sun, it's in Cancer. So there's the Cancerian nurturing lunar type of qualities as well, tied up with the Cancer zodiac sign. But more importantly, it falls in the 7th house, which is the house of partnerships and committed relationships. And so when I look back, I only just discovered astrology recently over the past couple of years. So I did not know this about myself, although I questioned, why did I always put emphasis on relationships? Why was I always finding myself in a relationship and then going through a breakup and then having it be such a traumatic and emotional time for me? And so being able to understand a little bit more through astrology and why I'm seeing constant reoccurring themes in my life, it makes sense that I go through relationships and I learn so much about myself and about my capabilities through the relationships that I find myself in. So I also, this is something that I haven't admitted to anyone or said anything to anyone, but it's a thought that has crossed my mind, is that I thought that everybody, even when I was a teenager, that everyone is looking for a partner. Literally, like, that's what I thought everyone was doing, because for me, that is what felt so natural to me, with the sun in the 7th house, with my religion being, super strong in like finding that person and that making a family together, procreating. So I always thought that that's what everyone was thinking. But actually, now that I've grown up a little bit more, experienced life, gone through some things, have been a little bit more autonomous and separated myself, found myself outside of the religion, in trying to be able to figure out who I am as an individual, as a human, I've realized that a lot of these beliefs that I carried weren't actually they're not what everyone thinks.
No. And it's very funny when someone is talking to you and they assume that this is how you must think.
Yeah.
So whenever I became single, I found people saying things to me that I thought were really funny, like, oh, you'll find happiness again, as if to suggest that being single, I can't be happy.
Exactly.
Or,
yes.
But surely you want this, and just assuming what I want. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, oh, just take the time, and, if you wait, then he'll be there for you. And I'm thinking, how do you know that I'm holding out for anyone? I'm just living my life. I don't have to be viewing it through the lens of life doesn't start until this prince comes along. That's not realistic. There's this mistaken notion out there that you are not complete until you find this other person. And that's why we use the language and terminology, which to me is very disempowering. We say, you complete me, my better half, my other half, and all this rhetoric implies that I'm broken, I'm incomplete, I need someone to fix me. and we joke about it and say, oh, let me ask the boss, let me ask my organizer, as if I'm just this helpless half of a person here, and two together, now we can get anything done at all. Now we can open a bank account. Now we can buy a house. And that causes people to put big things on hold, whether they want to travel or they want to purchase property, move to another country, all these kinds of things. They think they've got to hang around and wait. And equally, once people are in a relationship, they can sacrifice big things that are so important to them, but think that the relationship is more important than that. So holding off on moving for a promotion because they don't want to leave this person who's based in this city, and so on. So in that way, by not acknowledging our own life journey and story and independence, then we can miss out on a lot of great opportunities for growth, learning, and experience. And the restriction is always coming from us and or society and how we talk about it collectively. So it'd be interesting the next time someone says that kind of language to, if you have the rapport to do so, start to question that rhetoric. Are they really your other half? I think you're so amazing and capable on your own. Make it a joke, but start planting those seeds that you are whole on your own.
I 100% agree on that. And I really liked what you said, where you said something along the lines of acknowledging our own life story. And just back to astrology, there's one other thing that's kind of major, and that is where your moon was positioned at the time of your birth. And the moon, where it's positioned in your birth chart, can tell you about, it can describe to you your physical body, but also the environment that you find yourself in, common themes with that, and what I mean, and how it's positioned in relation to the sun. So I have the moon and the sun in the 7th house. So I derive a lot of my feeling of safety, security, and my most impactful environment. I'm explaining this weird, but I find that in the relationships that I find myself in. So when there's someone who has the sun and moon in the 7th house, it means when they are together, it's hard to separate your plot line or your purpose with the environment that you're in. So I find myself in relationships that is kind of like the environment that I find myself in. And on top of that, my son is there, so that's like the plot line and how my life is. So there's a lot of emphasis on that area in my life, so to speak. But what you were saying really resonated with me about being whole on your own without having a partner, and so taking the time to figure out who I am as a person and how I want to be, how I want to show up in the world before I jump into a relationship. So what happens, or what needs to happen usually, or what can happen, you don't have to do this if you have the sun and moon in the 7th house, but it is suggested that, and I just did this naturally without even realizing, was that when you find yourself so lost or so engrossed and so enmeshed in your relationships, I should say, then when you find that it comes to an end, it can be life-changing, and you could feel like a sense of devastation, because you had a lot of your identity was on this relationship that's now no longer. So processing that for me was like, okay, well, I'm not gonna jump into another relationship. I'm going to find myself, find my footing, and that was the next step that I wanted to talk about just a little bit, was what do we do when we find ourselves in a breakup, in a relationship that's ended, and we are feeling all the hurt, all the pain, inner turmoil, inner chaos? Who am I? Asking these big questions. What do I do now? First of all, we need to feel our feelings and not avoid them. If we are not acknowledging or facing the hurt and the inner turmoil, the chaos inside ourselves, and we turn to things like alcohol or avoidance
or social media.
Yeah, social media, then I feel like we are just numbing.
Yes.
What?
Suppressing it.
It needs to be processed. It needs to be felt and released.
Yeah.
And so I do find that people who are more able to, or more capable of feeling their feelings, can process it a little bit more easier. That's the experience that I've had in the past, is people who are able to be like, wow, I feel so sad right now. Like, I just want to cry. I'm just going to let it all out. And they allow themselves to just let it all out.
Yeah. So labeling the feeling and then allowing the emotion to run through and run its course.
Yeah.
And I remember being in a bad relationship some years back and not realizing how unhealthy of a state I was in because I had gotten so used to numbing my discomfort with social media doom scrolling. And I didn't even know it was happening because I wasn't very aware at the time. I knew that I was unhappy, but I wasn't verbalizing it. So if anyone asked me, I would have said, no, it's fine. Everything's going to be fine. And that was huge denial from me. But then at night when if my mind started to think about unhappy thoughts about the situation, then I would doom scroll social media. And when the relationship finally ended, that was also my solution. I'll just scroll and watch more funny videos. And it wasn't even a conscious decision. It was just natural. And I can imagine other people reach for the bottle or drugs or just parties, hookups, all of the things that will
just putting a Band-Aid on something that's not going to heal.
Yeah, bringing their mind away from the present, what is happening and what they're feeling.
Can I just say how harmful it is, or how unhelpful it is, to continue to follow your ex on social media? I feel like in today's world, it's such a smaller place, and it's so easy to stay connected without being connected. And it's not helpful when you are still following your ex and you see their pictures pop up, their stories pop up on Instagram, or the posts that they're making, and next thing you know, the new relationship that they've entered into, and that it's just not helpful for your growth or
for you to move on.
It's not good for you. Yeah, it doesn't help you moving on. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and people have so many ways to hide from the present, which is the pain that you have to go through to come out the other side. And one of the classic things that is always featured in movies is just eating 10 tubs of ice cream and watching junk TV.
Yeah.
And again, like if you're really desperate, fine, but don't call that processing your emotions.
Yeah.
You know, you can use it as an emergency thing, but
I think it's okay to do once in a while.
Oh, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying that is not the processing of your emotions.
Right.
So do it by all means if you need to do it, but then also go and feel the emotions.
Yeah, there are times where I've been so busy, like with work and all sorts of other projects that I got going on, where I'm just sick of using my mind. I'm sick of always having to think analytically or been thinking about something, problem solving, that I think, you know what, I'm going to waste my time this Friday night and I'm going to binge watch junk reality TV shows and eat ice cream and just, get lost in whatever I'm watching. Like, But that's like almost in a way that's me saying I'm going to escape from my world just temporarily, just to give myself a break, but then I'm going to come back to it and deal with whatever it is that I've got going on.
Yeah, and you do need to do something to give your mind a rest, 100%. And that can look different for different people. It could be binge watching Netflix. It could be going for a walk, going for a swim, going to the sauna. I like to listen to classical music. It's something that I recently started doing.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, I remember my grandma watching one sister who was into hip hop back in the 90s, and she did this little lineup of moves to some modern, I don't know, it was Britney Spears at the time. And so we were going, oh, you should do that dance for grandma, show her, because grandma was visiting. And then, so we said, turn the music on. And then the music started and grandma goes, that's not music. Only classical music is music. But she was like, the dance is very clever. Just so you know, classical music is real music. And she was very particular about making that point.
That's so cute.
Yeah. So there's different ways, and there's no shame or judgment or rule. Like, everyone has to do what's right for them.
Absolutely.
All we're saying is, when you get to it, then do invite those emotions. Because when you invite them, then that's how you can release them rather than having them stuck in parts of the body.
Yeah, totally. And then part of the healing process, I would say, is feeling our emotions, and then is letting go of what could have been, letting go however that looks like to you, letting go of whatever it is you're trying to hold on to. It's easier said than done, and I know we did a episode on that, episode on letting go specifically, so check that out if you want to hear us talking a little bit more in depth about that whole process. But when I say letting go, one big thing for me is looking at analyzing the situation, seeing how your actions contributed to the breakdown of the relationship, and also likewise seeing the contributions of your partner and how their actions led to the breakup, because it was a two-way street here. It's not just all on you. And once you see how your actions contributed and how they showed up in their part to play in this story, you can start to understand a little bit what was outside of your control to begin with. So it kind of alleviates a little bit of pressure on you to be like, man, I really messed up that one. Like, it's not all on you. And I just think that when we can see our partners or the other partner's actions in this, in their part to play, I really think that it's helpful, because it helps us to see that, again, it was not all on us, and it was a two-way thing, but also understanding that it was not anything there was not anything we could have done. Does that make sense? Because
not having that regret, because when people come out of a relationship, they're clinging to what could have been, how it should have been, maybe
what I could have done.
Yeah, I should have done this. He could have done that. She could have done that.
Yeah,
and you're grasping at this false reality and using it to punish yourself and torture yourself with you have the sadness from the relationship ending, but then you are playing these scenes and wishes again and again, thereby amplifying your discomfort. And when you have a negative emotion, according to the research, it should last for around 90 seconds. So the only thing that prolongs the emotion is the stories and the movies we play in our heads. And obviously, there's a heck of a lot of movies, depending on how long the relationship lasted. And that's how we can take a few weeks or a few months or even years to get over a breakup because we keep replaying these scenes and then feeling the sadness all over again. So if you are blaming yourself and putting yourself down around what you could have done or what you should have done, then you're going to perpetuate those feelings of sadness and loss and grief probably more than you need to actually learn and grow from it. But I like what you said about looking back to see what part you played, because that's the reflection and the growth.
Yes, the reflection and the growth. And I think in that whole reflection process, in seeing what was outside of our control to begin with, that can also open your eyes to see, like, maybe the loss that you're feeling is not such a loss after all. Maybe he's not that perfect person you thought he was, you know? And a lot of that is being able to see that your partner has core beliefs and has past wounds and ways of relating, in all of that's outside of what you could have done to save the relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you're not responsible for their core beliefs, and you're not their therapist to try and help them change their unhelpful beliefs. That's on them to do that work, and they may never change those, which is why if you look back and you see that, oh, those beliefs were actually maybe not something that I wanted to have in my space, then in that sense, maybe you dodged a bullet and you are on the up, going towards a brighter future. And by having that reflection, then you definitely will feel less loss and start to feel really good that relationship is no longer. If I look back on some of my history, you keep changing your views and who you thought was right for you at the time, or who you were so in love with. It's always been the case for me that when I look back and I think, oh goodness, I'm so glad I'm not with that one. So, you know, your views change on who you want in your life and how you think. And just knowing that can be really helpful when going through a breakup. If you think, oh, but maybe now it feels hard, but if I think about previous relationships that didn't pan out and I wouldn't want to be with them, I probably will feel that way about this one too in a few years. So I know how it's going to go. And that's not to say that it will always go like that. They have the phrase, right? The one that got away. That's the one that you thought, oh no, that would have been a good relationship, but it didn't work out. There's always got
to be one.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about moving on in relationships after a breakup, and I look back and I think, oh my gosh, the breakups that I went through in my 20s, or, you know, when I was a teenager, which were not many because I did not date a lot in my teenage years, but that doesn't mean that the pain was any less. But I think, oh my gosh, and I think, why is it easier to move on now than it was back then? And I think what it is experience and knowing that it gets better.
That's right. You know it personally rather than people telling you.
Yes.
Because did you have people tell you in your 20s that
always
time will heal everything, and you're just like, not this?
Yes.
You know, you just don't believe them.
You truly don't feel like there's any better. You know, you just want your person back. And but you know, and when you get into your older years, you're like, you know what, actually I do believe that there's something different out there, more suited for me. And it's a different perspective. It's not like someone better, it's more like someone more suited.
Yeah, more suited.
Compatible to my way of being. You know? Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Because it's not a judgment, you know. People will ask, why did the relationship not continue. And we use this terminology, why did it fail? As if it's a game or a test you have to pass. You passed or you failed, right? The relationship succeeded or the relationship failed. But it really comes down to compatibility in all aspects. How you think, what you value. Of course, the physical dynamics as well. And even economic standing, does it line up? You know, if you have one person that is constantly badgering the partner for financial help, that can become a burden. And then you also have, we are talking about core beliefs. So we could liken that to spirituality in saying that whatever is your spiritual view, whether it's regarding well-being, how you tackle things, how you face challenges, or if you believe in quantum physics and energy and the power of using energy to better your life, all of these things have to line up. If they don't line up and you have someone who views the world a certain way that's in stark contrast to yours, then you're going to keep butting heads because you're actually in two different universes and you can't find a way to meet.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that kind of situation is really hard because you want full acceptance of who you are by the person that you're with. You also want to accept them for who they are, but when they're being who they are and you can't support them in that because it's different to how you believe, it can start to feel a little isolating because then that person doesn't feel the support or not getting what they need from their partner, and vice versa. And then there can be growing resentment and things like that, and it just becomes a whole ordeal where you have two perfectly good human beings who mean well, who had good intentions, just on different pages.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean one was right and one was wrong.
No.
And I think that kind of perspective is important to see what you need in a relationship, not as an individual, but what you need and where your capabilities lie in being able to support or love the person the way that person wants to be loved and supported. So
I just had some interesting thoughts when you were describing that, because when we think of loving someone, we think of full acceptance, loving them wholly and unconditionally. And I think that perspective is a real openness to just seeing them how they are. And Ram Dass talks about this concept because he says we don't judge trees, but we judge people. So when you see a tree, you don't go, why isn't it more slanted, or why aren't the leaves bigger? It's just a tree. That's it. And then we see a person and they're just being exactly who they are. And we say, why couldn't you be a different person? But they're them. So what are you asking for? So the level of openness, and I would couple that with the concept of where the line is for you. So I'll give an example. Could you be with a partner that believed in aliens and you didn't? Okay, so if you were really open, you might say, I don't care. I love all your other qualities and we get on and you believe in that, that's fine. So that's openness. And then they believe in flat earth. And then you go, okay, wow, that's really different, but I honestly don't care about that because it doesn't make a difference in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
And then they believe in lizard people. And so when it comes to that, what I mean by the line is you decide at what point it's too much for you.
Yeah.
And if you are fully open, then fine. They can believe in anything as long as it doesn't get in the way of your day-to-day life and they're not chewing off your mum's head and saying, you must believe in da-da-da-da. So those are important things to think about, the openness and the line, and knowing what is really important to you. For example, if someone had different political views to me, I actually have no political views. I know that people can get very attached to certain parties, and I just see it all as like an organization, a particular flavor of ideas. But people are people, governments are governments. And since I've started coming into Buddhist and Zen Buddhist philosophy, I'm incredibly open to all ideas. It doesn't mean they're mine or I take them on board, but I will live and let live, and you all can believe what you want, think what you want. It doesn't make any difference to me. But if you are choosing a life partner and they're going to be influencing your children, then how much are you open and where is the line? I think those are some ideas that you can play with, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think there have been thoughts that have gone through my mind in terms of partnerships in what is right for me. And I think, you know, I don't tend to follow any kind of, I don't follow the news, because it's just one thing that I feel like I'm way too sensitive for that kind of thing, and I just want to be in my little bubble and in my little world. And call me selfish, but that's how I feel like I cope. But then it's like, okay, and then if I choose a partner who centers their life around politics and around how they feel about the government, I'm thinking, is this for me? Because I've shut it off in one area of my life, but I'm getting it through secondhand.
Yeah, you didn't sign up for that.
Yeah, so there's that, like, you know, so the line, where do you draw the line?
I think you can also negotiate as well. Like, there is no requirement that you share everything together.
Yeah.
You know, you can say, hey, this is these ideas or this information is not for me, but I don't think it actually has anything to do with our relationship. If you're happy, hit up your mates about this that love this stuff. It would be the same if you were into fly fishing and I'm not. You know, go to those people that love this, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a deal breaker. It can just be a matter of understanding that we're coming away from the concept of this. The significant other is your other half. They're a person you're in a relationship, in a partnership with. They don't have to complete you, and they don't have to share all of your life together. You can go have a fishing trip with the boys and no, I'm not coming along because I don't like fishing, and that's okay.
I love that. I really love that. It's such a good point. That also reminds me of that whole concept of having friends, having different kinds of friends, having your own life outside of the relationship. And I think that's a sign of a healthy relationship, in fact, is having your friends, having a circle of friends that you share with your partner, having those things that are in common, commonalities, whatever you want to call it, but also being able to have the outlet that you need through friends where you want to step away from the relationship and go and do fun things outside of the relationship and maintain that autonomy from that relationship.
That's right.
Yeah.
I can't remember it exactly, but there was a scene in Gilmore Girls where there were a couple lines. I'm not going to remember it exactly, but the main character says, so the man that she's dating, he says to her, why don't you just tell me everything, something like that. I'm going to be your sounding board. And she says, well, who do I go to talk about us? Implying that there has to be someone else I can talk to as well besides you. And she didn't mean we're having problems. She just meant there's going to be other topics that I don't go to you for.
Exactly.
And he thought that was very cute.
Right. And a suspicious person would be like, why do you need to talk to people about us?
Yeah, and that's just seeing it through a certain lens, right?
yeah, I definitely think it's good to have those people that you can call on to go do fun things together and take your mind off the relationship. But also, if there is anyone that you need to talk to, say, about the relationship, I would think that for me, what's worked in the past is finding someone who's very impartial and is able to maintain a sense of understanding that life is life, and people won't judge the partner for the things that they know. You know what I mean? Like, so if I go to someone and I have a friend who I trust, who's very level-headed, and I say, oh, well, like, you know, I'm having a rough time, I'm feeling really down, you know, been having arguments with my partner, blah, 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 blah. And then they listen without judging the other side and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he did that to you. Oh,
yes.
Like, you know, knowing who are the people who you can confide in safely and know that they're not going to hold anything over against the person for the things that they have heard.
Well, in counseling theory, we just refer to it as we don't want to get involved in telling the other person what to do or having any kind of assessment of them or the other person, because the counselor is the sounding board for you to sort out your own life. And we believe you do have the answers and you do know what's right for you. And if I gave you advice on what to do, you would probably do the opposite or purposefully not take the advice, because no one likes to take advice. And that's where a good listener and a good friend or person you can trust becomes vital. If they can listen and not tell you what you should do, and also not do what in coaching we call collusion, where they stand on your side and agree with negativity. So saying, yeah, they were wrong. And then by doing that, we're not allowing you to come to a place of balance and equilibrium, because now we're getting worked up together with you and we're fueling the negative emotions. So the idea is to be completely impartial and not tell you what to do. So if you've ever been frustrated when talking to a counselor wishing they would give you advice, they're never going to do that.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Now that I'm thinking about all the counseling that I've had in my life, and I'm like, yeah, that's true. They've never said anything about what they think I should do. Even though I'm like, tell me, you're the specialist. Like, what should I do?
Specialize in letting you find your own answers. This has been a great discussion.
Yeah, it has been great.
We've covered so much. Why relationships end, how to process it and how to reflect and learn from it, and even the astrological aspect.
Yeah, I managed to get the sun and moon in there.
Yes. Yeah. So fascinating.
Yeah.
And I know that people will benefit from this, especially if they listen to it before a breakup. So they have this information handy already as something they know they can go to.
I think even going through one could be helpful. It could help give you guidance like, oh yeah, this is what I'm feeling, and just be validating in their experience.
Yeah. My sadness is okay. My feeling of loss is okay. And riding that wave, going through it.
Everything will be all right in the end.
Yes.
You will see.
Knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel. We want to thank our listeners for joining us on this episode, and we look forward to many more beneficial discussions. Remember, the path to your best reality is in your hands to create when you become conscious.